All right, let's do this. Welcome back to the channel. It's lit. It's lit book reviews. That's tough to say at 8:30 on a Monday. But as you can tell, Jesse is not here. It's just me, Andrew. We're gonna try and start doing some solo stuff. It's not a competition between Jesse and I, but if this does get more views, we're all just kind of seeing what we already knew. Am I right, Jesse, or am I right? Nah. But anyway, today, Jesse and I have kind of some different interests when it comes to nonfiction. Jesse definitely reads a lot more nonfiction than I do, but today I'm diving into some things that I like reading. And it's not that he doesn't, but he's more of an American history guy. I'm more of a European and especially German and Soviet Union history has been like a super big fascination for me over, I don't know, the last 3-4 years. I think it's just because we don't learn a lot about it in school here in the States. And so, the more and more I dive into it, the more interesting it is to me, just mainly because I don't know a ton about it. But anyway, I read a book called Germany 1923. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. I'll pop it on the screen as well. Hyperinflation, Hitler's Putsch, and Democracy in Crisis. This is by Volker Ullrich. So he is a German historian. So this book is originally written in German, and he has translated it. So this book, just in general, kind of obviously dives deep into 1923. This is kind of seen as one of the most chaotic and pivotal years in German history. A lot of times when people think of Germany, they think of a swastika and Hitler. Well, these are kind of the foundational years that, get us there. So if we're talking Avengers Endgame, these are a lot of those prequels where we're getting the backstory of how Captain America becomes who he is. Um, Again, this is something where this may be a sentence in a US like textbook. So again, this was something that I found super interesting. And so I'm gonna kind of run through what I learned. I had to write a lot of this down, had to reference a lot of things because a lot of it just flew straight by me. So if you're interested in that, I'm gonna really break down this book, talk about what I liked, talk about what I learned, talk about what I necessarily didn't love as far as what I got from a nonfiction book. Just more with the writing style. I don't think it had anything to do with it being a bad book, but just more preferences for me. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. 1923, year like no other for Germany. So this is going to follow their defeat in World War One. The country is struggling. It's under very harsh terms from the Treaty of Versailles. So the Weimar Republic is created out of the monarchy that went into World War One. And so this Weimar Republic is going to be kind of their first attempt at democracy. But they're under a lot of pressure from the Allied powers. So we're talking Great Britain, France for sure, who, in my opinion, is a problem, and the U.S. So Volker, he's going to describe this year as a time of madness. So this is when Germany experienced hyperinflation. So we'll see their currency go to, literal worthless dollar like sign numbers that are. It's hard to fathom like how low of an amount that the Reimark ends up becoming. Um, Social norms are going to begin to collapse. Political violence is on the rise. And then this is where we'll see radical groups like the Nazis start to gain traction. So I'm going to pause a lot here, but mainly to catch my breath. That's bad. Also, I'd like to shout out my wonderful girlfriend for getting me this amazing Bijan Robinson jersey for Valentine's Day. I know it doesn't necessarily apply to the Weimar Republic, but shout out Bijan. Truly, the Falcons are back. So before we dive into kind of key events in 1923, I want to kind of break down something that confused me, just in case if, also disclaimer, I'm not a historian. I do have a degree in social studies education, but we've all been to college and we all know, well, maybe not all of us, but those who have, we know how easy it is to get through stuff. And so, I love history, but again, this is just what I've read. So, if I mess things up, grain of salt here, people, grain of salt. This is just something that I find fascinating, trying to share with you guys. But again, something that was really confusing to me is the political scene in Germany at this time. So again, it's their first attempt at democracy, but at the same time, like in America, we have Democrats and Republicans. Sometimes people will run as an independent, but for the most part, like Trump won this last election and he ended up having the actual popular vote, meaning he had over 50% of the country's vote. So, regardless if you voted for him or not, the point is at least a majority of the United States population voted for him. In the Weimar Republic at this time, there's so many different political parties to where if you have 25, 30%, like you have the highest like majority, even though that's a minority number. So someone who only has 30% of the country's vote could end up kind of having a lot of impact and influence, which is kind of crazy when you think of only 3 out of 10 people agreeing with what's going on. So, anyway, the Weimar Republic has a legislative body called the Reichstag. So, this system is like a modern parliament. So, the members of the Reichstag are elected through a system called proportional representation. So this means that parties get seats based on the percentage of votes they received. So this system has a lot of different parties, like I was kind of saying before, and it really makes it hard for one party to just have an overall actual numbers majority, like I was saying. So the higher percentages are going to be in the high 20s, low 30s. So because of that, parties are going to have to, negotiate with others and form coalitions. Um, but again, because there's so many parties, people are kind of stabbing each other in the back, not going in on deals like they say they were, and so things are going to fall apart easily over time. And it just makes it hard, in my opinion, for overall unity, and it kind of exposes, I guess, the weakness that democracy can have when it's under these terrible circumstances that the Weimar Republic is under. Um, but anyway, so on top of that, the Weimar Constitution, it's going to give a lot of power to the president. So in times of crisis, the president can use Article 48, which, in their constitution is a bypass of the Reichstag to rule by decree. And then the president can also dissolve the Reichstag at any time. Whenever, if they're doing some sort of vote and they can't come to a conclusion, he can just call for a resolve of the Reichstag and they revote. This was the part that really confused me and I had to kind of read more into because it seems just very overpowered, but then also it just slows down government so much because, you know, as soon as momentum starts to happen, or I mean, I guess he's only going to do that if there's not momentum, but I mean, think about it in the time of 1923, just with how technology was then compared to now. Um, they're going to have a whole new voting like system to vote in the new members of parliament. Um, and then after that, because there's so many different factions, they're going to have to kind of team up again. And I mean, it seemed very counterintuitive to me. And it just kind of slows the process down. But again, this kind of feeds into why people lose faith in democracy in Germany at this time. And it's going to create an opportunity for Hitler and others too, who are going to attempt, like with the Bolsheviks and some other kind of fringe groups, to kind of seize the moment and kind of lay down a strong leadership because it's just so many different, I guess a phrase is, a bunch of chiefs and no Indians is kind of the vibe I get from the Reichstag. So to really kind of break down the different political parties there, because this is what tossed me. So the Reichstag in general, confusing, but then also they're different parties because I don't speak German. It's acronyms: KPD, USPD, DDP, DVP, DNVP, the NSDAP. And so it's like, all right, what are these? So, we have a far left to the far right. And I'll kind of put up a graph here or a metric to kind of visually show. But I'm just going to run through a quick breakdown. It helps me mainly, but you may find it interesting as well because it is a complex scene that they have politically. It's not just Democrats and Republicans like we have in the States. So anyway, on the far left, we're going to have the Communist Party of Germany. So that's going to be the KPD. So they're inspired by the Bolsheviks, They want to create a communist state in Germany. And there was also the Independent Social Democratic Party, the USPD, which was more radical than the mainstream socialists, but less extreme than the communists. So again, Soviet Union's impact, like, Lenin leads a huge revolution in Russia. The czars are disbanded. Communism is now going on there. A lot of people in Germany are not about that. And so, there's still a communist party in Germany, but a lot of people are against that. So moving from far left to center left, there were the Social Democratic Party of Germany, the SPD. So they're going to support democratic socialism, and they were a supporter of the Republic, the Weimar Republic. To go to the center, we have the Center Party, Centrum, and they're going to represent the interests of Catholics. And then the German Democratic Party, the DDP, also going to be central. They're going to stand for liberal values and democracy. All right, moving from left to center right, we have the German's People's Party. What a tongue twister. The DVP. So they're going to support conservative economic policies and nationalism. Where nationalism is going to be the key thing that I kind of tie into right, far right. Anyway, Gustav Stresemann, he's going to play a major role in stabilizing Germany. He's a part of this party. And so from far left to far right, this is where we're going to see the Nazi Party, the National Socialist Germans Workers Party. Yikes. We're Nazis. So again, they're seeking to overthrow the republic, and they want to establish a dictatorship. Again, it's all about ultra nationalism, and within that is anti-Semitism. So anyway, we kind of got like a snapshot of the political landscape, which is going to kind of give us a picture of why it's so divided and unstable. Each party, they're going to have a different vision, and then they're going to try and give each other a little scratch on the back here, scratch on the back there to get what they want. But these conflicting agendas, honestly, kind of lead to more just chaos, which then the chaos leads to violence than anything. But anyway, to go into chapter 1. So chapter 1's titled "The Battle for the Ruhr Valley." I'm gonna pop up some maps and stuff too, just to kind of give some visual context. But the year 1923, it's going to start with a huge international crisis. So the occupation of the Ruhr Valley by the French and Belgian troops starts on January 11th. So this is going to start happening because Germany's given this huge reparation amount that they're going to have to start paying back, and they start falling behind on those reparation payments. And so France, they're wanting to kind of make sure they're going to get their money. They decide to kind of take matters into their own hands, and they seize Germany's industrial heartland, which is the Ruhr Valley. This is where I'm like, I kind of understand what France is doing here, but France continually pops up throughout history. And you're like, can we just play nice? But anyway, so again, the Ruhr Valley, it's vital for German coal, steel manufacturing. So losing this, Germany's already behind on economic payments. They lose a huge moneymaker with France just coming in. I don't know what France, I get it, but it's like what France is really just taking away a huge part of what was going to lead them to being able to pay anything back. At this time, the chancellor is Wilhelm Kuno. So he's going to declare a policy of passive resistance. So this is kind of a big deal, especially early 23, later into. So essentially, France comes in, occupies this area. The chancellor basically tells German workers to just stop working and to not cooperate with the French occupiers. So they're talking strike, sabotage, some few violent clashes, but nothing crazy. But essentially, they just stop working. But because they don't want to benefit France, but then also, it's still going to cripple Germany's economy because production is going to come to a halt. So to cover the cost, Germany starts printing more money, which always fixes everything. It's like it makes things worse, and so inflation just starts spiraling. So that happens, but also, this is kind of where some of the nationalistic themes come in. So the French occupation really just fuels the fire for these German radical political groups. And then again, hyperinflation, the beginning kind of starts happening. So to kind of sum up chapter one, Ruhr occupation leads to economic collapse and hyperinflation, setting the stage for, Germany's big crisis that's about to come up in 1923. So to get into that, chapter two, inflation to hyperinflation. So the hyperinflation crisis of 23, is one of the most famous economic disasters in history. So just to kind of give some stats, before the war, $1 was worth about 4 German marks. But by the end of 1923, that same dollar was worth over 4 trillion marks. 4 trillion, which I mean, that's an inconceivable amount of a number that, I mean, I can't wrap my mind around that. But anyway, so the main cause of this crisis was the government's decision to print massive amounts of money to cover its debts, including payments to striking workers in the Ruhr. So prices skyrocket so quickly that wages had to be paid multiple times a day. So Ulrich talks about how, you know, you'll get paid something in the morning for your work the day before, and you have to quickly go spend it, because if you don't, by the afternoon or the next morning, prices could be exponentially higher, and so you won't be able to really afford anything. And so they keep printing more money, and then they keep raising the prices of goods, and then they raise the prices of what people are getting paid. But it's always one step behind. So holding on to your money is not valuable at all, because the next day it's worth nothing, or even like a week or two. um so anyway, there's a lot of stories of Germans carrying around wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy basic things like milk, bread, cheese, that kind of stuff. If you're a middle class citizen in Germany, tough time. Your savings are just completely wiped out overnight. I mean, we're talking mass poverty. um at the same time, wealthy industrialists, so people who had capital in other foreign country or currencies, were able to easily kind of benefit by, again, $1 worth 4 trillion marks by the end of 23. So I mean, if you have any relatives there, or like some holdings somewhere else, I mean, you can easily bring in that foreign currency and, you know, multiply your gains by a ton. It's also going to wipe out like a lot of, like, one of the good sides, I guess, is if you did have debt before, obviously that debt is so easily payable now. So, if you got student loans or whatever, that student loan just doesn't hit the same when one mark goes from 4 to 2 trillion or 4 trillion. So, um eventually, it's gonna become so unmanageable that in 1923, in November, the government's gonna introduce an entirely new currency called the written mark, which is gonna stabilize the economy a little bit. But again, like, damage has already been done. I mean, we have wiped out the middle class, who has saved money and, kind of lived the life that I guess we're kind of told we all need to live, and they have nothing. Um, but anyway, so kind of to wrap up chapter two, hyperinflation destroys Germany's economy, and trust in the government driving people toward political extremes. So then we dive into three. So we're going to try, in Germany, that is, you know, we're going to try and attempt to manage the crisis at hand. So, the economy spiraling out of control, country's on the brink of collapse. The Weimar government knew it needed to take drastic action. August 23, Wilhelm Kuno resigned as chancellor, and he's replaced by Gustav Stresemann. So he's going to lead a new grand coalition government. He is characterized as a solid leader, and this kind of seems like a pattern where they're like, hey, let's pick this guy, a lot of hope. And, by the end of it, every guy just seems worn, because of, again, just the repetitive nature of the Reichstag, and just constantly trying to get votes from people, with there being so many different factions. It's just, I don't know how it's sustainable. But anyway, he ends up kind of taking a different stance. Remember, we have the passive resistance going on in France, where France takes over the Ruhr Valley. The previous chancellor, Kuno's like, hey, just don't work. So he realizes, Stresemann, that's unsustainable. So he ends that policy. So the workers go back to work. And Germany is able to kind of start making payments again on the reparations from the Treaty of Versailles. But a lot of Germans are going to see this as like betrayal. So a lot of those ultra nationalists who hate France and feel like they're being oppressed still by neighbors, they're going to see this as like a sign of weakness. Um, but again, like what can Stresemann really do? I mean, there's the options in the hand that you're given at this point with hyperinflation and, France occupying your most advantageous area. It's just, what can you do? So his government is the one though that introduces the written mark in November to stop the hyperinflation. Um, and so the written mark is not backed by gold; it's backed by land and industrial goods. But it will like kind of reinstate and restore some of that confidence in the German financial system that was like completely wiped out. Um, so again, these decisions help bring back stability to Germany, but they also angered political extremists. So again, the far left, they're going to see this as selling out to the capitalists, while the far right sees this as submitting to foreign powers. So again, far right, ultra nationalists, hate France. Why are we bowing to France? Is what it kind of seems like. But these kind of do save the Weimar Republic. Like for as much as like democracy is fragile at Germany in this time, I mean, Stresemann steps in, makes some tough decisions, and at any moment it could fold, and he really does continue it on, which is impressive. But anyway, chapter 3, Stresemann manages to stabilize the economy with the written mark, Ian's passive resistance. He's going to anger the left and right, though, by doing that. But he's going to save Germany from total collapse. But again, political tensions only getting worse. All right, chapter 4, called the German October. Um, this is where things start getting interesting to me. Um, you know, Ulrich says that it's essentially Germany's teetering on the edge of a revolution. So Russia has already had a revolution. And so a lot of those left wing forces, so left wing being communist, um, a lot of them are in Germany. So and they're being funded by the Soviet Union because a part of the Soviet Union's plan with communism is not that it just stays within the Soviet Union, it's to lead a revolution throughout the world. And so they're seeing maybe as Germany as the next group. Um, so anyway, there ends up being an uprising known as the German October, and it was centered in Saxony and Thuringia. Um, and so in those areas, there was a lot of leftist coalitions that had a lot of power. So the KPD planned to use these strongholds as a launchpad for a nationwide communist revolution, hoping to overthrow the Weimar Republic and establish a Soviet-style government. Um, the Weimar government catches wind, quickly acts. They're going to crush the uprising before it could spread. Um, and then the military occupying Saxony and Thuringia dissolved communist-led government. So this does lead kind of an uprising and like a spark in throughout Germany, I would kind of say. So Hamburg also tries this with the Communist Party, also fails. Um, and then because they kind of go all in, the Communist Party that is, they're left like severely weakened since they don't, achieve their main goal here. So kind of mainstream German socialists kind of they distance themselves even further from the communists just because they don't want to be seen as revolutionaries. Um, so again, that kind of wipes out the far left from the way Ulrich kind of presents it. Um, and because of that, it kind of does push it into the hands of the far right, which, just to kind of break it down again, because it is kind of what's left and what's right at this point. Left, communism; right, fascism. So right is Nazis, left is Soviet Union communists. So, I mean, two tough options, it seems like. But anyway, just to kind of overview for far left, Communist Party saw 1923 as their moment to spark revolution, but the German October, their attempt at a communist uprising, was quickly crushed by the Reichswehr, which is the German military, showing that the government was willing to use force to maintain order. All right, chapter 5. The chapter 5 is titled "The Call for a Dictatorship in the Beer Hall Putsch." That's such a tough word for me to say. Putch. This is where we will see Hitler's first appearance in this book, and kind of his first appearance on a major scale within Germany, or the greater lands of Germany, because it's in Bavaria. But anyway, this is kind of his first attempt to gain power. So the left wing revolution fails, but the right wing now has left, room to grow with the fallen kind of looked down upon left wing uprising that falls. So a lot of people are starting to believe that Germany needs a strong leader. And a lot of people are now starting to even openly call for a dictatorship, kind of believing that the Weimar Republic was never going to be able to figure it out because of its weak. A lot of people saying it's weak and incapable of restoring German strength. So just because there's so many different opinions to have to cater to. So the most famous far right event of 23 was Hitler's beer hall putsch, which is an attempted coup by the Nazi Party in Munich on November 8th and 9th in 1923. So Hitler and his followers, including General Erich Ludendorff, planned to seize power in Bavaria, but then they march on Berlin they plan to seize power in Bavaria and then march on Berlin to overthrow the Weimar Republic. Um, they begin by storming a political meeting in a Munich beer hall where they declared the beginning of a national revolution. However, their plan quickly fell apart. The Bavarian police and military remained loyal to the government, and when the Nazis attempted to march through the streets, they were met by police gunfire, leaving 16 Nazis dead. Um, this is an interesting scene. Like what Hitler does, it kind of definitely shows you that spark of what he was capable of doing, like very early on, of him essentially going into this meeting, this national meeting in Munich, and just taking full charge, having his men kind of surround the building, go on stage, holding guns, get these political leaders in the back room and basically make them agree to something. They choose not to agree. He comes out on stage, tells the crowd that they have agreed, and the revolution started, and they start marching, and where they mess up is they let those guys go, and they basically like call Berlin and we're like, yo, we got a problem on our hands. But again, Hitler is arrested. He's sentenced 5 years in prison, but he's only going to serve 9 months. And this is where he's going to write his famous book, Mein Kampf. But this is going to kind of show that right wing extremists are willing to use violence to achieve their goals. And so it is interesting to me, though, that this isn't the end of them. So communism in Germany, when they try an uprising, gets squashed. You don't really hear much from it. But it's interesting how Hitler and the socialists or the National Socialists, like they're able to bounce back from this. And as we'll kind of see later on, I think a lot of it just has to do with the national identity that they tie into, the strong nationalist ties. But anyway, to continue on, chapter 6, separatist movements in the Rhineland. So much of Germany's in chaos. We got economic collapse. We got political extremism. And a crisis is brewing in the west of the country. So a lot of the parts of, I guess, the greater Germany start attempting to just try and leave and be their own independent states. And a lot of these are kind of buffer states where they're somewhat pro-French because they're like along the border of France and Germany. But anyway, many locals are going to view that these separatists are traitors. But most of these movements kind of are like flan, pan flashes. So they start quickly, but they lose momentum very fast. Um, and then by the end of the year, the separatist republics, they're all going to collapse. And if anything, it's just going to kind of roll the ball to create this idea of national unity, and kind of bring a lot of people together, it seems. Um, but it also shows how France was actively trying to destabilize Germany from within by encouraging a lot of these border regions to leave. Um, but anyway, a lot of these are going to fail, and it's just going to only lead to a further push to the extreme right. All right, chapter 7. Stabilization from Stresemann to Marx. So again, Stresemann's able to do a lot of good things, it seems. In the end, he kind of gets shafted, but sometimes you live long enough to become the villain, um, which he was not. But welcome to Germany, 1923. So again, Stresemann's the one who introduces the written mark. It's going to be backed by land, industrial goods. It's going to prevent hyperinflation from continuing. Things are going to stabilize. People are going to gain confidence. But November, due to political disagreements, he's going to be forced to resign. Wilhelm Marx, he's from the Center Party. He's going to become the new chancellor. Marx is going to continue a lot of these same policies that Stresemann already had started, especially um, with France and the Ruhr Valley, and again with focused on the written mark. So Germany's, they're kind of halting the quick spiral that was happening with hyperinflation. But again, there's already now like hugely deep scars. So the middle class has just been burned. So, I mean, things are looking up as far as economics. But I mean, watching your life savings that you've worked for years, I mean, just disappear, that's going to take a lot of time. So, anyway, people are already looking for quick answers, and the fix to hyperinflation is not a quick answer. So again, this political extremism it's just opening up this door of like the political extremism door is just slowly being opened and opened and opened to where it's like, I mean, the path Hitler has by the end of all this, it's like, I mean, how did we not see it coming? The perfect path. But to move on, Stresemann's out, Marx is in, but again, political unrest still there just because people want quick answers, and there's nothing that can happen quickly when it comes to fixing 4 trillion marks, coming back to normal. So, chapter 8 is really where I got stuck in this book, if I'm being honest. So, this is titled Culture in a Time of Crisis. God bless Volker Ullrich for his tedious ability to really focus on details, and I appreciate that because the historical accuracy of this, I'm not doubting. But at the same time, you can only hear about so many different German cinemas and so many different playwriters and so many different movies and radio stations. I mean, you get them all here. You really do get them all. So I think the overall theme is that, like the rest of these other areas, whether it's economics or politics, there is kind of a flourishing renaissance of German culture where a lot of social norms are tested kind of like never before, whether it's sexually or, you know, socially, or kind of the drug and alcohol use. It's, one of those renaissance y vibes where it's morals kind of seem to be placed on the back burner because things are so bad. It's all about just immediate enjoyment. Um, and that kind of makes people an even bigger target for these right wing groups because people are just looking for immediate, like, fixes. So, I mean, whether it's politically or socially or whatever, I mean, and so these groups just come in and, as we'll see, like their following expands just so fast and so rapidly just because people are looking for quick answers. So, Germany, 1923, last chapter, chapter 9. A new period in German history is what it's called. So, with the introduction of the written mark, the collapse of separatist movements, and the failure of radical uprisings, Germany is going to seem to have survived 1923, but at what cost? So, 1924, the Dawes Plan was introduced. This is going to restructure Germany's reparation payments, and it's also going to bring in a lot of foreign aid from the U.S. through loans. This is going to lead to a temporary economic recovery, and then a lot of stability, honestly. and prosperity. It's going to seem like they're returning to pre-war years of development. Um, hyperinflation was still a thing. It's going to make Germans deeply suspicious of democracy. It's also going to, again, like we were saying before, push them more towards the support of authoritarian solutions. Um, meanwhile, extremist parties on both the left and right are going to gain experience, support, and national recognition. Um, the Weimar Republic is going to survive, though. It's going to limp into the mid 1920s. But again, with all this influx of American money and whatnot, it's really going to make the Great Depression. So when the stock market crashes in 29, it's going to have a huge impact in the U.S., but it's going to have a massive impact in Germany as well. So again, this is just going to kind of be a point where Ulrich suggests that 23, it shouldn't really be seen as a moment of chaos, but as a warning sign to how fragile the Weimar democracy really was in times of crisis. Um, which I mean, I guess is true even to today. But anyway, so that's kind of an overview of like a breakdown of each chapter. But I do want to kind of take a step back and look at what is Ulrich really trying to say here, and what is the kind of the big picture, um, and what makes 23 such a pivotal year in German history. I mean, I'm sure you can already kind of guess where I'm going to go with this, but one of the big themes that Ulrich proposes is a term he calls double devaluation. So it's the pairing of economic and social identities collapsing, or like having a unity in like a yin yang sense of collapsing together or rising together. So he kind of describes this as, people lose trust in their money with hyperinflation. Um, but they also kind of lose their way of life completely. So we have these people that have saved again for their whole lives, and their savings become worthless in weeks. You have workers getting paid twice a day just so their money can be worth something in that time. Um, and people are going to be calling for leadership. So the fall of economics leads to the fall of the social way of life for Germans, your average German at that time. So I think the one of the main takeaways and one of the main themes is kind of seeing how that goes hand in hand. The other big theme is just how extremism thrives in chaos. Um, so political extremism flourishes in uncertainty, is what Ulrich says. When the government failed to control the economy and keep order, both the far left and the far right, both lead attempts to take over the government. I mean, both fail, but they're gaining momentum. 1923 is going to be a test for whether Weimar democracy could survive, and it does for a bit. But again, the cracks are huge in the foundation. And again, kind of one of the last things that he kind of is wrapping up here is just the fragility of democracy in Germany at this time. Um, it's a democracy on paper, but its institutions they're weak, and they're struggling to maintain like really any resemblance of order. And then with the president able to just kind of rule like a decree, I think it's Article 48, that, he can just kind of take control when things get tough, or just resolve the Reichstag and like do a whole nother vote again. It really weakens what democracy could be for Germany, and makes people kind of point to, why don't we just have a dictatorship? Because it seems like that may just be a better option. So anyway, but overall, 1923, it's a massive turning point. When people think about the rise of Hitler and the fall of the Weimar Republic, that happens around 1933. But Ulrich, in this book, he kind of makes the case that 1923 was just as important as 1933. This is kind of going to be the year that proves that democracy in Germany is not invincible. Um, you know, Extremists are going to gain valuable experience, Hitler's going to fail in 23, but he's going to take that failure and he's going to build on it. And he's going to build a political machine that's going to take over Germany, like massively. So again, the Weimar Republic's going to survive, but it's never going to recover from this. And so, 10 years later, democracy's kind of gone. So, overall, what we can take away from Germany 1923 is that it's not just about one year in German history. It's kind of about how nations react to crises. Um, it's about what happens when democracy is pushed to the brink. Um, and I think Ulrich gives a good look, an in-depth look for sure, um, at a very chaotic time. You know, it's isolating in on Germany, obviously, but I think a lot of people can use this and kind of see like what societies will do when they're pushed to that breaking point. Um, overall, I did really like this book. This year to me is so fascinating. So I'll kind of read almost anything. In regards to like, is this the one about the Weimar Republic that you should read? Maybe it is. It's about 350 pages. It is just about the singular year of 1923. It's not in chronological order. That really threw me off and took time for me to get used to. He breaks it down by topics, like I kind of went through with each chapter. Um, but overall, yeah, I mean, it's a great book. I mean, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Um, and again, it's just such a fascinating time. It's foundational um, for what ends up, leading to one of the greatest tragedies in all of human history. And it's kind of this year and a lot of different factors that occur to lead for this to even happen within Germany. But anyway, chatted a long time here. Who knows how much will get cut? Who knows how much will survive? Who knows if anyone will watch this? Again, if you are at this point, thanks for listening to someone who really has no credibility to stand on to even attempt to talk about this. But it's just someone that likes history and that's fascinated by things that they don't know. So again, thank you guys for being here. If you kind of like this format, let me know. This did take a lot of effort to kind of type notes out. So, if you enjoyed it and you learned something, definitely let me know. And if I got something wrong, also let me know. And kind of let me know where to go to next. I'm thinking about, I got a couple different books, as you can see, probably up here, um, that go deeper into the 20s and the rise of the Nazi Party. I'll probably get into some of those here soon and drop those on the channel and kind of just slowly segue ourselves into World War II and then the decline. But anyway, I've had fun doing this. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. This has been a production of It's Lit Book Reviews. See ya.